Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money all in one place for free, Alex. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and I got to know how it works.
I'd be happy to tell you, Bobby. Spotify for Podcasters is really easy. It lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone.
From where?
Right from your phone or computer.
No way.
So no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. That is very important. People are listening to podcasts everywhere these days, I hear.
Video podcasts are also available on Spotify for those who like being in front of a camera. You can even kickstart conversations with your fans, as listeners of this show well know, with Q&As and polls.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways. Differentiated revenue streams, very important. We know all about that, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it is totally free with no catch.
Spotify for Podcasters has made it really easy for us to distribute our podcast, monitor analytics, and engage with our fan base all in one space. So if you're interested, download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, we're doing something very special today. It's the Tipping Pitches 5th annual State of Labor in Baseball 2024, a year that I'm not sure that our guest ever really contemplated getting to. You know, wasn't really ever looking that far in the future. Were you, Mike?
Nope.
I was so certain I would be dead by now.
Well, I'm glad you're not, because you have to be here providing free labor for us.
Happy to
analyzing
be here, pissed
the
to
industry.
be alive.
That kind of encapsulates your energy really well, I think. You make that your Twitter bio. Hello, sir. It's good to see you. It's been a minute since we chatted.
Yeah, I miss you. Were you back in town for Christmas? I guess I wasn't here for Christmas. We're going to talk about this in the rant, but yeah.
I was back in town for Christmas. You know, Philadelphia around the holidays, it's exactly the same as the rest of the year. People still don't give a shit about life.
Yeah, and one thing I miss about with climate change, you don't get that beautiful Christmas slush.
Yeah,
I just remember the ShopRite parking lot of my youth just being covered in piles of gray sludge from
people
December
don't know about
to March.
They don't know shit about ShopRite. Alex, you don't know about ShopRite. You don't even know what that is. Look at you. You don't know.
That's true. Deer in headlights over here.
Did you get snow on Christmas this year, Alex, in Chicago?
No, we got it on New Year's, though. So that doesn't really count, but
yeah, it's not the spirit of New Year's. They don't really say that. That's not really a thing. Mike, 5 years of this, 5 years of covering labor in baseball. How does that make you feel? It's a cheeky amount of old.
It makes me, man, I feel so old now. I would say mostly it makes me feel proud of how far you've come, Bobby. I feel like I've raised you from a cub. You were just an embryo when we first started podcasting together, and look at you now.
What do you think is the number one thing that you've given me that you still see? The tool that you gave me that I've nurtured the most?
I just think the confidence to really move up from our, I really showed you the ropes on our little rinky-dink baseball show, and now you're, basically part of the headlining act of the big picture. Name and lights, all this,
You know what I have taken in life from you, Mike? A healthy skepticism towards everyone with any shred of power. And that's what we're here to talk about. How are you feeling about labor in baseball? We are 2 years removed from a lockout.
Yeah.
Only 1 year removed from actually receiving the CBA document that ended that lockout for public consumption. And we're at what I guess we would call traditional labor peace. But what does that mean to you? Do you believe in the concept of labor peace? How are you feeling about the state of labor in baseball?
No, I don't know that I necessarily. There is no peace without total victory, I think. So, absent global proletarian revolution, we are all in a state of conflict.
God, he's so back. He's so back. He's locked in.
The fastball is clocking in.
But there are different intensities of conflict, and I feel comfortable with the level of, I would say, relatively low intensity of baseball labor conflict. This is definitely, I think, the lowest ebb of intensity in the conflict between players and management, certainly since you and I have been talking about baseball together, maybe, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years, because, we had the lockout. I think everybody on both sides of the table really needed to see a work stoppage in order to break that wall of tension that everybody was so afraid of the strike. And now that we've got that out of the way, I think we can deal a little bit more frankly, a little bit less like high-mindedly now that now that we've all lived through a work stoppage. The minor leagues are unionized, which was,
that's right.
I know, I still have my t-shirt. But I haven't had to wear it in the past year or so.
Put it out to pasture,
because they have I might make it into a pillow. Might sew up the arms and leaves and make it a body. I was about to say a body pillow. Might be a bobby pillow. But
also good. Well done. Well, I've missed that. I've missed the puns. We don't have enough punning in podcasts anymore.
So what I was building up to is that, yes, everything is good now, or at least everything is stable, but the success of every labor movement rests on, yes, appreciating your victories and, knowing when you've done well and, being able to really sell when you accomplish something, but you're also constantly looking ahead to the next fight. And this is something that I think sports unions have had kind of a hit or miss record on. Here I'm going outside baseball a little bit, but you have to gear up for the next thing. And so, we're seeing, I would say, free agent spending than we were maybe 5 years ago. I think that immediate glut either side of the lockout really helped sort of reset some of those higher level salaries. But I could see some more trouble brewing based on, I don't know, we'll probably talk about the Ohtani contract and the deferrals and what that means for the market. That's like the big thing that I think is in terms of the stuff that's in the news right now. And then we talk about state of labor in baseball. There's the amateur side with NIL and the college game. And I don't know, there's something that happened with regard to the NHL draft in the past week that I don't know if you've been on, but I want to bring up and sort of talk to you guys about how that might apply to baseball. So not as busy as it has been, but this affords us to sort of the opportunity to take a step back.
I feel as though we have a little bit of a buffet with all of the topics that Baumann just laid out there and all of the ones that you and I shared before we started recording this podcast, Alex. But your plate is empty. Where do we go first? What station are we stopping at first?
Well, I mean, I almost feel like we should get Ohtani out of the way because I'm really curious to kind of hear your perspective on this. I know Bobby is as well, because it caught, I think, just about everyone off guard. The structure of it, the extremely large number, obviously the crazy amount of money that's deferred. And I guess I kind of want to start with how much you care about that. Like from the perspective of a fan, does what the Dodgers are doing with his contract kind of matter to you, and what sort of precedent, if any, do you think it sets? Because there was a lot of sort of hand-wringing in the wake of it, right? What is this going to mean for the free agent market? And then we just kind of moved on, right? Because he's such a unique player, and he's the only kind of player that can sort of garner that sort of thing. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on it.
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head there by saying we moved on because he's unique. And this is, when I've been asked about this, I did a couple radio hits and, obviously wrote about this a few times. I would hesitate to use anything with Ohtani as a precedent because, until they start letting Jake Cronenworth pitch again, there's nobody like him.
Cowards.
And so, and he's such an unusual public figure as well that I don't know how much what he does applies to everybody else. So and also in terms of the deferrals, this is something that, I'm not the only person who's saying this, but any other team could do this. But I think the important thing to remember with the deferrals is that it lowers the practical value of the contract. Like the reason it counts less against the competitive balance tax is that getting your money later makes your money effectively worth less. And so my big question with Ohtani is not the deferrals. I think I would say, like, I hope everybody's sort of briefed on, like, this is not $700 million. This is closer to $460 million. But there are deferrals in the Teoscar Hernandez deal. There are deferrals in the Mookie Betts deal. There are deferrals in the Freddie Freeman deal. This is something that the Todd Boehly, who's in the Dodgers management group or ownership group, now owns Chelsea in the Premier League. They're doing a lot of this very long contracts to sort of amortize the value of transfer fees. So to do some sort of this creative accounting to get around their, what they call financial fair play rules in soccer. So this is just sort of Dodgers MO. And I think the important thing is that everybody is understands that this is not for all practical purposes. This is literally $700 million, but it's not practically $700 million. And I think, players, agents, GMs, they're all on the same page about that. So as long as everybody's going into this with their eyes open, I don't really care, whether Shohei Ohtani himself gets $460 million from the Dodgers or $700 million or, something in between. I'm curious what this means. My biggest thing is, does this put a de facto cap on earnings for other players coming up behind him? And I think this is going to be less of a problem than it would have been, just because a lot of the big stars, like there's nobody like Ohtani, there's nobody like Trout, but like Fernando Tatis Jr. is locked up long-term. There's no like Harper Machado coming through the pipeline, with one exception. And that's Juan Soto. And I'm curious how he and Scott Boras handle this next winter, because I think that you can spin Ohtani's going to make more money than God no matter what. He wants to play for the Dodgers. He took a deal that made him the highest paid player in baseball and got him to where he wanted to go and gave the Dodgers a chance to compete. I don't know, or at least allowed him to claim that it gives the Dodgers a chance to compete. Maybe that gets converted into an ownership stake later. And so that's all well and good for Ohtani. But if Soto gets into free agency and he comes up against teams saying, well, Ohtani's worth 460, you're not getting more than 460, or you're not getting more than 46 million a year. I don't think Scott Boras is going to take that very well. And I don't think that the players union should take that well. So I that's my only real concern with the Ohtani contract, is the idea of it being held up publicly or within these negotiations as this is the new thing that we can't exceed. And that ends up diminishing Soto's value, which in turn diminishes the value of every free agent for the next 5 to 10 years. And so, but at the same time, Soto is so young and he's got the ultimate bulldog age, and it would not surprise me in the slightest to see him blow past this and set a new benchmark himself next offseason. So as far as Ohtani's deal goes, I won't know what to think about it in terms of like the state of labor until Soto signs his.
Yeah, I don't know. It was very interesting to witness, but I think I kind of fall on the same side of like thinking that Soto very well could blow past. I feel like people, like, I forget how young he is. Like, what is he, 24?
He will hit free agency after his 25 season. I forget when his birthday is. I don't have it memorized like I do Trout and Harper. So
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It really wouldn't surprise me. But
Soto's 25 now, and he'll be 25 he'll turn 26 during next year's playoffs.
Come on, man. That's not fair.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, do you? I feel like there was a lot of sort of speculation that this was maybe going to come up in the next round of CBA negotiations, right? That they're going to try and litigate away the ability for players to do this sort of thing. And I don't know why the Players Association would ever come to the table on that sort of thing, because you're removing the power. But like, I mean, do you see that as a sort of sticking point years down the road? Again, I know it might depend on sort of where things land with Soto. But do you see that coming up at all?
I don't know what the incentive would be, because first of all, I'm not really sure which side would want to ban like these big deferred contracts, because apparently, this was something that Ohtani wanted, something the players union has pushed to keep in. And like this is a horse trading thing. So, whether owners want this or the players want, a limit on deferrals, like that, whichever side wants it is going to have to give up something in order to get it. And I don't know. I don't get the sense that this is important enough to either side that they would actually make a rule change about it. I think all this boils down to is just, it's the ultimate like high level view of economic imbalance in sports, which is that particularly in a closed system like Major League Baseball, where there's no relegation, when one team is good, that's bad that the Dodgers are good. We have to make them spend less so that teams that don't spend as much will be competitive. And like, first of all, that's not going to work because part of the reason that Ohtani wanted to go to the Dodgers is they're so well set up. Like they spend a lot. They win that sort of that's tautological, I guess, but it's a good place to work. They have good coaches. They have good player development staff. It's a nice place to live. Obviously, if all things being equal.
Counterpoint. Who wants to live in LA? Come on, let's be honest.
I don't, but like
this is an anti-LA podcast. So much, let's keep it that way, Baumann.
It's a good place for young, rich athletes to live.
Okay, good clarification.
So, like, if I were picking some, any major league city to live in, like, it would be someplace cold and miserable. We don't need any more evidence that I'm wired differently than your average baseball player. But so the Dodgers would have signed him anyway if everybody made the same salary is my point. And it's just it's such an anti-creative, like really nihilistic way of looking at the world. We have to peg back the teams that are actually pursuing this as a sport instead of as a real estate scam. So, I mean, that's just really what all this boils down to is it's when fans are saying it's, oh, my team didn't get this player and I'm going to fill my diaper about it. And when other owners are saying it, or people carrying water for owners, it's much the same sentiment. So I don't know. I don't think that really changes anything, the structure of this deal or the dollar amount involved.
I don't think it does either. I was always in the camp that this made it, the structure of Ohtani's deal made it actually easier for any team in MLB to, in good faith, offer it than if they actually had to pay him $70 million per year. And so I don't understand, just because he happened to land with the Dodgers, I suppose that the frustration comes from the fact that they could afford the $70 million per year and they basically don't have to give it to him now, and they should have to give it to him because they have it. I think that was like the very narrow line that fans were sort of trying to argue, or that like small market defenders were sort of trying to argue. But I remain more fascinated in how this plays out with someone like Juan Soto. I know his name keeps coming up because he's the next superstar free agent to come up who will get one of these 10 plus year contracts, most likely, if we take the Scott Boras model and we apply it to Juan Soto. But, Boras was very intentional in coming out and saying that the market in his mind is still status quo. And that was the way that he described it. And you might say that, I thought that was interesting, three-dimensional chess from his perspective, because for him to say the market is status quo would imply that, okay, Ohtani's not actually making $70 million per year, so I'm not going to try to get 60 for Soto or something like that. But I think that he was basically trying to unpack the idea that the market is not changed in that deferrals are the expectation now, because that'll be more harmful to players who don't want to take deferrals, his clients who don't want to take deferrals in the long run, than just admitting that Ohtani is an outlier and that no other player really in this market, the way that it's structured, could or should command 70 million average annual value.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ohtani, that is close to what Ohtani is actually worth, like $70 million a year.
Agree.
But I think the way to look at this, and the way I would look at this, is the dollar value and the percent that's deferred. These are canards. This is not the point. The point is the deferrals actually do make the contract worth less to the player for practical purposes. It's why they get discounted against the competitive balance tax. And so just don't look at this as a $700 million contract. Look at this as a $461 million contract. And I think once you do that, it all makes sense. Like, nobody cares about contract structure. Like, if it's a no interest deferral, then that makes that actually makes the contract worth less. And so the headline figure is big and flashy. And I think my hope is that big headline figure, the $700 million, gives Boris more room to maneuver with Soto. But again, we won't know until it happens. So I'm curious to see how that all plays out.
No one cares about contract structure except for maybe the 3 people sitting on this Zoom right now.
That's right. And the thousands and thousands of droves of people out there listening.
I'd say most of the people who care about contract structure work at FanGraphs, and I'm very happy that they do, because I've had to have so much explained to me over the past year.
Before we get too far down the rabbit hole of, I mean, I know deferred money is like, it was in the news. It's a recent thing. But before we get too far down the rabbit hole of the MLB, the state of labor in the bigs, I don't want to forget about the CBA. So the minor league CBA. So last time we talked, the players had formed a union. They had been recognized. They were about to start the process of bargaining. And since then, I think maybe faster than any of us expected, maybe faster than even the players involved, maybe faster than anybody except a select few people on either side of the table expected. And minor league baseball CBA was agreed to and ratified.
I lost my shirt in the Effectively Wild predictions game because I thought this was going to take all season.
I thought it was going to take like over a year, based on all of the things that they could have brought to the table and fought over and gone tooth and nail, and all of the high-powered lawyers on each side who, were not going to be hurting for money, given the fact that the minor leaguers were, now part of the MLB Players Association and had all of their resources to fight this first contract down to the wire. But it happened really fast. From a 30,000 foot view, everything that's in the minor league CBA, it's obviously not perfect. No CBA is ever perfect. Is it better than, worse than, or about what you expected it to be?
I would say just in terms of so I think you have to look at this. This is a common refrain you see from labor people who, like, they unionize someplace like a Starbucks or a newsroom or like a tech company. And in order to undermine the union, the company gives everybody a 10% raise. I think Tesla just did that today. And so I think you have to look at those gains, like the housing gains and stuff, the stuff that they got before the actual unionization effort got off the ground. You have to look at that as part of this whole process as well, even though that wasn't the union as such. And so, I mean, I'll just say this, like, the minimum salaries got doubled at every level, at least. And so any CBA that doubles your salary, I think you have to tip your cap and say, well done. It's not what minor leaguers make in other sports. Now, baseball's minor leagues are bigger and sort of go deeper than they do in hockey and basketball, but I think it gets them to within striking distance of where you can get closer to what some minor league hockey players and minor league basketball players make. And obviously, there are things that I don't love about this. I think I'm less of an anti-minor league contraction hardliner than some people are, but obviously reducing the size of the minor leagues is it's bad. It's bad it's bad for the game. But I think it's something that was probably going to happen anyway. And so, yeah, I think that's like the big trade-off. So I don't know, you can live on some of these salaries now, which you couldn't before. And I think just that alone is a huge win.
It is sort of interesting to see MLB sort of, again, with there being a CBA in place, with there being a union in place, them sort of clawing at the edges, at the things they can take back. You mentioned potential contraction of minor leagues. They reduced the size of the domestic reserve list as well. MLB spent a lot of time and energy lobbying Florida politicians this year to like exempt minor leaguers from minimum wage, right? Obviously, that's where half of the teams play their spring training, and so it almost seems like they're sort of shifting the front a little bit to these sort of legal battles that they can maybe wedge. I don't know. I'm curious how you think that plays into MLB's strategy going forward now that there's obviously a framework of like, you can touch these things, you can't touch these things.
I think having the CBA is a necessary bulwark against this because, I mean, there's some, so this is not strictly labor related. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but when the Braves got their subsidies from Cobb County for their new stadium in the Battery, it was so unpopular there. The county commissioners who approved the deal got voted out of office it was characterized at the time as like a deeply Republican area. Like that area is a little more purple to blue now. But it was viewed as like, this is the end of the stadium financing graft machine. And I think, I don't want to blame Donald Trump specifically, but I think that the Overton window for corruption has swung back in a big way in the past 7 years. And so because of that, it's so easy for a business to just to either, through campaign contributions or just by courting politicians who want to own workers, like that's own perhaps in the literal as well as idiomatic sense. You can get so much done if you're trying to screw your labor force. And so that's why having this on paper is it's a big deal. And at the same time, like, it makes me wonder what MLB's end game is with some of, you mentioned Florida, like the minimum wage exemption and stuff like that. Like, it makes me wonder how productive that's going to be.
I think when it really honestly can't be overstated how fast this all happened. Like how fast the minor league unionization drive happened, the recognition, the how fast they started bargaining and how fast they agreed to a contract was actually shocking to me. But when I look at it now, about a year later, or a little bit less than a year later, I think about it more in the terms of, were working conditions bad enough that the faster they came to any contract would be better than the things that they would have expected to get had they drawn this fight out longer? And I guess when I reflect back on it in that way, for all of the things that are in this CBA, for all of that you could say about how if they went on strike, that they probably would have had a lot higher salary minimums. They probably would have made a lot more inroads in terms of long-term sustainability of the minor leagues and limiting jobs and cutting jobs. But would they have been able to organize that given all of the unique challenges that they face being split between minor league levels or teams just cutting players for no good reason, or all of these things that logistically we talked about made it hard for them to even form a union in the beginning?
I made this argument on this podcast last year, and you called me a sellout.
Did I? I don't know that I used the word
pull out
sellout.
the receipts.
You didn't say sellout. You
producer run the tape.
Counter-revolutionary or something.
No. What happened was you called me accelerationist and yourself incrementalist. Yeah, and then I said I think of you as more of the accelerationist. And you said, I don't think that's true. And I think accelerationist is cooler to be. So really what happened was you were just telling me I was cool.
Well, that certainly wasn't my intention.
Right. You're talking to someone who listened to this episode like an hour ago. So he's fresh in his mind.
I did, yes. I listened to it to refresh what we talked about. It's important to make sure that these are one big thread that we're weaving. But do you share that perspective then?
Yes.
The same perspective that I have, that how fast they got the contract is more beneficial to more human beings in real life than the theoretical future contract that they could have gotten had they gone on strike or drawn this fight out for 2 years.
Yes, and I also don't think that a protracted strike, like, I don't know, we talked about this last year, I think. Getting these guys to all come together and go on strike, just knowing what that might mean, knowing what missing even a couple months of their minor league careers might mean for their ability to make, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars later. Insofar as like 90% of these guys will never even reach arbitration, but they all think they're gonna, sign a $50 million contract once they hit the majors. I just don't think that was ever going to happen on an organizational level. And once you know that it's not in your best interest to drag this out, not just for that reason, but because, like you said, the sooner these raises get put into place, the sooner these people's lives improve immeasurably. So there's that. And also, like, I imagine, based on our experience negotiating a collective bargaining agreement, the minor leaguers probably had an easier time getting their emails returned. So, and like everybody who's working on the CBA is working on it full time. So MLB slowed down the bargaining dates, going around the lockout. That was a tactical maneuver. That wasn't like a
practical thing.
A practical thing. Like it wouldn't actually take them a month in between meetings to actually get their shit together and come up with a counter proposal. So I think both sides wanted to make
a month is such a specific amount of time. It's almost like you've almost had experience.
I just
having to wait a month.
No, I mean I've hit myself over the head with a hammer so many times since that.
You're watching Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind like, this seems kind of nice, not soul-crushing at all. This seems like a preferable...
Well, you're telling me this is the 5th annual
way of life.
State of Labor in Baseball podcast, when in reality it's the 13th, and I just can't remember the other ones.
We're holding together a very finite version of reality. It's all a house of cards. If one of us lets
Alex's hair keeps changing color.
Yeah, I think they're in an interesting play. I mean, do you think that, like, again, I don't know how these structures work within Major League Baseball, but like, is it, I mean, I know the answer to this. Is it more work to negotiate two CBAs? But like, you're dealing with two sort of distinct groups with their own unions and their own sort of structures and stuff. I mean, does MLB have to shift its focus at all? Because I know for me, that'd be a lot of plates up in the air.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to negotiate one.
You and me both. It's so
it
is a heavier lift
work.
Just because you've got
Alex.
two, just because you've got two, like you said, related but distinct unions, but also like tons of companies deal with way more unions than this within their labor forces. So like, I don't know, like hospitals have more than two unions. So it's, you just hire a couple extra lawyers and you make sure that, like, your vice president of HR or whatever the title is in contact, constant contact with the union leadership. So and also once you get the first CBA out of the way, everything else that follows is easier because you're working on stuff that already exists. So yes, I think it is a heavier lift. But they just bill more hours to their outside counsel and everybody's fine.
It appears that the Major League Baseball CBA ends in 2026, which we know at the end of 2026, and the Minor League Baseball CBA runs through 2027. That's not ideal. I think that they should line up because any sort of collective action in which you could both do it at the same time would be. It's hard to quantify how beneficial that would be, especially to the minor league side, where like if they were going to go on strike, doing it with the protection of the Major League Baseball players also being on strike, and we can bargain these contracts and we can fight for these principles at the same time, seems like a sort of thing that would have been an admirable thing to try to get the CBA into. I guess 3 years would have been short for a first CBA. Yeah. I say as someone who is renegotiating a 3-year CBA, but
and I'm also not sure why, is there personal experience that would lead you to believe that, having related unions with the same CBA bargaining, CBA expiration date would give you a stronger negotiating position?
I'm just saying from a macro, someone who's interested in labor perspective. The general strike, it's coming, Mike. We got to all line up. Everybody's CBA expire at the same time. They should have considered that. It's just bad union bureaucracy, I guess. I mean, it was probably very hard to get them to even give 4 years, let alone 5.
I think 5 years is. I mean, 5 years is the standard.
Is the standard for yes.
So, and I'm not really sure that either the MLBPA or the league wants to negotiate to at the same time. So the reason, like you said, the general strike and everybody lining up for 2028 is such a big deal is because you want to be able to shut down the entire works and exert pressure like on an industry level rather than a company level.
Yes.
And that doesn't really apply to baseball because I keep bringing up the U.S. women's national hockey team strike. as like the pinnacle of sports labor action in our lifetimes. And the reason that was so successful is they got to all the potential scabs before USA Hockey did. And having the minor leaguers unionized, having them in the fold, it prevents them from, like, let's say they want to go replacement players again, like they did in 1995. Where are they going to get them? So just having the minor leagues under contract, while the next, God, I hope there's not another lockout, but if there is, having them under contract when the next CBA comes up, when there's the next potential for a labor stoppage, I think that provides as much leverage as negotiating 2 new CBAs at the same time would.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is largely true. And the things that they're fighting for are often so different that I don't know that there would be one thing across both contracts that both bargaining units would be like, we're not signing a contract without this in it. It would have to be much more like we're not signing our contract until you guys do in order to help you out. And I think that just I guess the political machinations of those bargainings are so just on different planes that
I'm skeptical of how altruistic your average big leaguer is toward.
I mean, me too. Big time. As evidenced by the history of the MLBPA.
I did have a funny image while we were talking about this. Like, imagine explaining 2028 and the general strike to like Chris Sale.
That's he'll be pitching for the Braves still then, according to the extension that he just signed.
Is it going to go that long? I thought it was only 2 years. Is 2028 the next? Don't scare me like that.
It's closer than you think, Mike. It's closer than you think.
Just put me in the fucking ground. Jesus.
I would like to ask you about something that I don't know how much of an existential threat it is to labor in baseball, but it is certainly of economic concern to the entire baseball industry. And I would like to frame this question through one specific baseball team, and that is the Seattle Mariners, who are I would say not crushing it these days. From a financial and operational perspective. Now, Alex and I spent a hilarious amount of time explaining what's going on with their RSN deal and them buying the RSN and all of the distribution of their game a few weeks ago on the podcast. And I think it was a great conversation. If you didn't check it out, maybe go back and find that. But the Mariners, to me right now, are the perfect example of a team who is an alarming blueprint that other teams will either try to follow or will just grab onto the tail of and cry poor over. So the Mariners RSN is not performing as expected, and they are a mid to high market, but obviously not a market like LA or New York. And they have used this largely as an excuse to not really add to the team at all. And they obviously broke their curse a couple years ago. And since then, the team has gotten 5 to 10% worse, and they seem like they're going in the wrong direction. I'm curious whether or not you think that the Mariners are something of a canary in the coal mine for the next fight, the next industry-wide macroeconomic fight over how much money is coming into baseball and how that money should be redistributed. When we first started doing these episodes, it was amidst what we now can safely call a capital strike.
Yeah.
And I'm still not really even sure why they were claiming they had to do that. And now I just see basically just like a Febrezed version of that same exact argument that the Mariners are trotting out there. So I turn it to you. Are the Mariners the canary in the coal mine for what we will be talking about 1, 2, maybe 3 years from now on these episodes?
Maybe. I think that depends on how, in sort of these mid to upper mid markets, how the RSN bubble bursts and what shape that takes and how they figure out to recoup that local broadcast revenue. I don't know what the Mariners are doing apart from getting cheaper and getting worse. And so like the fact that they're getting worse while getting cheaper doesn't bother me that much. It would be nice to see Luis Castillo and Julio Rodriguez in the playoffs every year. If working for a Mariners fan, it would probably be better for me if they were good. But I've seen how Meg reacts to
games with
high
stakes.
tension Mariners games. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Maybe I'll be happier if they go 72-90 for the next 5 years. If they're making the playoffs every year, I might have to find a new job. But what's going to happen if they get cheaper is they're going to get worse unless they get a lot smarter, which it doesn't seem like they're really interested in doing either. And so it's annoying. I would say not as annoying as what the Orioles are doing, where I don't want to say lucked into, because they did like a lot of, I don't know, drafting Gunnar Henderson in the second round is like, I don't know, they should get credit for doing that, but they're going to get like 3 potential MVP level up the middle guys all at the same time, plus a bunch of other really good complimentary pieces. They won 100 games last year and they're doing jack shit with it. They're wasting it. And like, I find that a lot more offensive than, I don't know, the Mariners being the 18th best team in baseball with the 18th highest payroll or wherever they end up. Like, I think they're a cool team with a cool history, and I would like to see their fans have something worth caring about, but they're suffering their punishment for being run the way they are. And I don't think that's inappropriate at all.
I mean, how annoying do you think this gets for fans? When Bobby and I talked about this a few weeks ago, he made a point that was like, fans shouldn't have to care about this, shouldn't have to give a shit about RSNs, right? It's like whatever your rights fees are does not affect me. In theory, I mean, if the rights fees go up, those, that might get passed down to me in my TV package. But I don't know. There are all these sort of moves that are kind of being made in various corners. Diamond Sports is talking with Amazon potentially, right? But Major League Baseball is trying to claw back these rights and maybe create their own platform or work something out with Amazon or Apple on their own. I mean, and so like the owners and front offices throw out these excuses, right? That say, hey, we don't have this revenue coming in, we can't spend on the team. That's, you hear a version of that sort of excuse kind of every day. I mean, do you think there's a point at which fans, where it kind of boils over to a point where fans are like, what the hell am I doing? I literally cannot watch my favorite baseball team or my favorite hockey team or my favorite basketball team, right? In the case of that specific RSN. So I'm wondering how this unfolds in the next couple of years as a consumer, which I know you're often thinking about.
No, I think that's a good way to put it, because I think fans should care really about 2.5 things. So like, one, is my team good? Are they going to be good? And like the half is like, are they going to be interesting? Like, is it going to be a good experience to watch them? Whether that's going to the park or, I don't know, is it going to be fun? Like, this is an entertainment thing. This is a leisure activity. Like, am I getting my leisure in by watching them and following them, caring about them and spending money on them? And the other thing is, how annoying and or expensive is it going to be to see them play? Those are the only 2 things that I think fans should care about in terms of these RSN deals. And there are a lot of different ways that this can go. We could, I don't know if we're going to see the dissolution or the reintegration of cable. I know that we've talked about that on this podcast more times than I can count.
Legendary stuff.
But there are multiple ways that I think there are multiple tenable ways for this to go. We've seen, I think it's the Phoenix Suns and the Vegas Golden Knights have done some creative things with their own like streaming rights. I think a lot of Mariners fans, but not all, would, if it's cheap enough, would, pay for like watch every Mariners game for, I don't know, $100 a season. I think that probably sells a lot. Or if there's like a pay-per-view option, you get, $1 a game or something. I think that's one way it could go. I think that we could see renegotiation of streaming packages. I think we could ultimately see the end of blackouts, and maybe MLB.TV, picks up some of that slack. I don't know how this is going to go. I will say that, like, I could see more than one side of this issue, because I subscribe to a lot of streaming services anyway. So like the odd game on Peacock or Apple doesn't bother me, but for people who, can't afford to subscribe to anything other than like Netflix, like and who want to watch every single game. That's the other thing. It's like, I'm not going to watch all 162 games of any one team. I could see why that's frustrating. And then you look at what MLS did, where like I wasn't a diehard MLS fan, but when they were on ESPN and Fox, like or on local TV here with the Union, I would watch, decent number of games. And then they went exclusive on Apple, which if you're a diehard, like that's great, but I haven't watched a single MLS game since that happened. So I think you can silo this stuff off.
I thought you were a big For All Mankind head. How are you watching For All Mankind?
It's a separate.
Oh, okay.
Package.
So you have to pay like an
if it was just all
package.
on Apple, then like I'd watch MLS all the time. But I don't care enough about, ironically, the Philadelphia Union to like I'll watch them when they're in the Champions League, and that's on the cable that I pay for already. So yeah, I think there's got to be a mix. I think of national, local TV, and streaming. I don't know. This is not I really don't know enough about the future of streaming media to really tell you what the smart play is, but whatever they do is going to work for some people, but not for others.
I don't know. I don't know that any of us really know enough about the future of streaming media. I don't think the people who are in charge, I think they might know the least, like I don't trust really David Zaslav's decisions about what he's putting on his own streaming service that he owns so much of the history of our intellectual property in America.
He
fucked you individually.
Yeah. So right as I start this cycling newsletter, I'm going to plug later. There was a streaming service called GCN Plus, which showed if you had a VPN, you could see like every big cycling race, and it's owned by like the Warner Discovery
behemoth,
and they shut it down for no reason.
We could call it the Warner Discovery Trust. We can.
So now, like, I'm like, I don't know, some of this stuff's going to be on Peacock, but we're going to keep We're going to go back to the old days of pirating and steephill.tv.
Yeah. That's not what you want. But I don't know that part of the I guess existential fear that I have over this when it comes to the state of labor in baseball is it just seems like there's a lot of little fires in all parts of the consumption of the game. It's very expensive to go to watch a game in person. They almost don't want you to do that at this point. It's expensive to eat when you're at that game. It's expensive to watch the games on TV. It's confusing to watch the games on TV. It's inconsistent how you watch the games on TV. And it seems like there's a lot of little, like I said, little fires cropping up in all different parts of the game and how they monetize it. Now, is it labor's problem to deal with that? No, it's not. It's the business's side to deal with that in capitalism. Like if they want to monetize it, they need to figure out how to get their revenue streams in order and to continue to make it at least watchable enough that they can extract money from consumers like us, which they've done. For all you can say about Major League Baseball owners, they've been pretty good at extracting money from their consumers over the history of the game. I guess I just worry that like anytime there is any turbulence on that side of the baseball economy, it is usually labor who has to solve for it because they will
or the consumer, some combination of
exactly. And so are all of the sorts of things that they need to triage on that side, are they just going to be like, no, you guys figure it out, you guys take the brunt of it? And is that going to become the only thing that we're talking about on this podcast or in this corner of our little weird internet over the next couple of years? Is they're just crying poor all of the time because of the collapse of streaming or the consolidation of streaming or TV doesn't exist anymore. And who will bear that brunt is, I think, a fascinating question. I have some sneaking suspicions. I don't think it's going to be Rob Manfred and his group of cronies.
I think is where this is going to end up blowing back on labor, because whenever there's any kind of economic downturn, there's a recession or like some disruption in the supply chain, service gets worse, prices go up, and we pay more. Like consumers pay more for gas or cars or semiconductors or whatever. And when those conditions ease, the prices stay the same. They never go back down to normal. There's never like a temporary price increase. So to your point, what's going to happen? Let's just like use these. If baseball is 100 units, right? And that's the money that comes into the game, and labor takes 50 and ownership incurs 30 as costs and as other costs and has 20 as profit, then, oh no, I gave myself hard things. 25 and 25 costs and profit. So I could do this math in my head. Let's say the streaming bubble collapsed and revenues went down, and instead of 100 units coming in, there was 80 units. Like if labor got 40 and ownership went to 20 cost and 20 profit, that wouldn't, I don't know, it'd be bad for everybody, but it would be equitable or relatively equitable. What's going to happen is no matter how big the big number or how much the big number collapses, ownership is going to want not just their 25 in profits, but they want to make their profits grow to 30 or 35 with every deal. And that's where you get something like the series of lockouts that almost killed the NHL. And so I think baseball is there's so much more institutional inertia involved in baseball than hockey that I don't worry about like that kind of real like comet that killed the dinosaurs type of thing happening.
Yeah.
But it's the first CBA. I don't know. It wouldn't shock me if we lose like half a season in a lockout, the first CBA after the streaming bubble well and truly collapses. But on a team by team basis, like the Mariners lose their RSN, or all the Bally teams or whatever, a lot of the teams that are most likely to do what you said are already doing it. Like, what the fuck are the Pirates going to do that they're not doing already? Or the A's, or the Reds, or the Orioles, or even teams that are good now. Like, how much further can they pull things back? So I think that they've gotten so greedy.
They got a lot of players on league minimum already, there's not really.
I mean, they've gotten so greedy. There's not that much more for them there's not that much more space for them to go.
Yeah.
This might be like galaxy braining it a little bit, but like, is there in a roundabout way, any sort of, I guess benefit is the wrong way of putting it. But like what we've seen in this is like what it ultimately does is it starts to pit teams against each other. I mean, Major League Baseball would love an overarching agreement that like everyone is happy with, but because everyone's deals look slightly different and there's different streams of money coming in, like you have these small market teams that are facing different conditions than big market teams. And it does seem over the last few years that we're seeing maybe more fractures in what has long been a sort of united front on ownership side. And we saw that especially like with regard to the Padres for a couple of years, right? There was, and it feels like maybe the Jets have cooled on that a little bit because like they never got good. But I don't know. I wonder if like there is a way for labor to sort of take advantage of it in some regard. The fact that you do have owners who are like at each other's throats in some regard.
I love where your head is. I love this. I love this energy. They're in disarray. We attack. You're like Napoleon right now.
Right.
Well, the way you framed it as like this being a recent crack in the facade, you're like if Napoleon was too young to remember the 90s. Because
it's true.
They wanted to break the union and institute a salary cap, and they didn't. And I think
they got too greedy.
The psychic damage from that war led to a whole bunch of ownership side victories, but I don't know I'm not fucking Sun Tzu. I don't know exactly what the the labor relations stratagem is, but I think that there's a public relations wedge that you can drive between these teams. And I think that, I think just the sea change in the quality of messaging that the union has had between the 16-17 CBA and the lockout, and then the minor league unionization effort, I think that they're getting savvier about how to exploit that. I don't know if there's like a legal opening, but there's definitely a public relations opening that sort of turn fans against ownership.
Mike, we're coming up on an hour here.
Yeah.
We have long discussed the historic nature of your consumer rants at the ends of these episodes. I don't know how they began. I don't even need to go back and know. This is oral history at this point. At the end of every State of Labor in baseball, you come to us with a rant about day-to-day consumer life, baseball or not. And I think that time has come.
When we were texting trying to schedule this, and as I was forgetting where I was going to be for the 2 weeks after Christmas and making you guys completely rewrite your calendar, I was actually texting you guys from the airport as I was trying to fly from Philadelphia to Atlanta for Christmas. And I said, remind me about the SodaStream water fountain. So you guys,
cursed words.
Oh, it's so much worse than you think, Alex. So when I fly, obviously you can't take liquid through the metal detector. I don't like drinking a lot of caffeine on a flight because I like to sleep on planes. So I take an empty water bottle, my plastic $8 Costco water bottle that I carry everywhere. And I get through security and I fill up at a spigot. And I'm sure that you guys know the water fountains they have in airports. They have them in gyms where they have the water to mouth spigot. And they also have the little vertical thing so you can fill up your water bottle. That's like, I remember the first time I saw it. It was like watching the moon landing. It's one of my favorite inventions. And in Terminal E, where Southwest flies out of Philadelphia.
We're dropping names.
So I've looked up how long this thing has been here. This is according to airportimprovement.com.
Reliable source.
That's where I go as well.
I should read them daily.
June 26th, SodaStream has replaced several of these water fountains with branded devices that are 14 times the size. They operate on touchscreens. Touchscreens fucking suck. Touchscreen, like, there's nothing wrong with switches and analog. You can't, like, I had to wait like there was 3 people deep this line because the SodaStream machine, first of all, it would just give you a set amount of water instead of just you putting your bottle under there and the sensor reading it and filling it up until you took it fucking away. And so you had to like tap the fucking thing 3 times in order to get your full water bottle. And the big, like this big branded monstrosity that sticks all the way out into the thoroughfare, which the Philadelphia airport's basically the Hobbesian state of nature anyway. So that's great for traffic. And the big innovation that it has after making things worse and advertising the fucking apartheid company, one of the 6 companies that's actually on the BDS list, replacing our public utility, our very God-given water, our human right, with fucking SodaStream. It says you can have still or sparkling. Great. And 6 flavors. Who fucking wants flavored water as you're about to get on an airplane where you're just trying to take water with you so you don't get dried out in the desiccated, recycled air? That means you can't taste anything anyway. It's privatizing and making things worse, making everything it touches worse in the service of geopolitical evil. I could not think of a better illustration for what ails American society in 2023/24 than the SodaStream machine at the Philadelphia International Airport.
I have to ask, because I'm on PepsiCoPartners.com, which I guess owns SodaStream. I don't know.
Shocking. I'm so surprised that one of the big companies acquired SodaStream.
Did you download the app? Did
I download the app?
I hear there's an accompanying
that
app.
Was my mistake, Alex. I didn't download the app. Maybe
it's a connected ecosystem.
My water bottle. Maybe it would have improved upon the push this button and water comes out technology. It's been around for 150 years. The Romans are laughing at us.
That is actually true. They're like, all they can do is talk about how much we think about.
Oh, the little bubble water machines. Look at these soft, decadent people who think they've evolved beyond the little lever that makes water come out of the hole. That's all I want. That's all I want is literal water, the literal sustenance of life, without having to navigate through fucking Google Play at the airport while 300 angry guys named Frank are lined up behind me.
I have experienced SodaStream at airports in San Francisco. It's horrible. It's horrible. You're right. I completely agree. Why put a touchscreen where a touchscreen doesn't belong? I completely agree. I don't want carbonated water. I just want cold water. Just cold water.
I'd settle for lukewarm water if it came from a public utility.
What I thought you were going to say, Bobby, because I've also been through the San Francisco airport many times, and what they have is, I haven't seen the SodaStreams, but they have like just different water dispensers with like a sensor on the side.
Yeah.
So you put your water bottle in,
put your hand,
and then you hold your hand up to the side.
Yeah.
And it recognizes that your hand is there and dispenses water. And every single person who walks up to it puts their water bottle in and then takes it away and then puts it back and then looks around to the sides and then looks to see what the other person is doing next to them. It looks for a button. And it's miserable. I
gotta say, this is we're over engineering these days.
Yes,
I know that this has been true for a long time, and this has been at the center of many a consumer rant by Michael Baumann, trademark. However, this kind of reminds me of how yesterday I'm in the city of Los Angeles right now for work, and yesterday the Uber I called, you don't get to control the make of the car that comes when you call Uber. You don't. If you could, I would choose never to ride in a Tesla. Unfortunately, I have been in the back of a handful of Teslas because of the Uber Corporation. And every time I'm like looking for the fucking button to press on how to get out of the fucking car. How about just a handle? What was wrong with the handle where I can see the handle? I got to press a button to like spring load open the door. What if we didn't do that? What if we didn't?
Just the fact that all of these companies are run by and for people who are like, they're money mover arounder people. They don't make, they don't build. Because if they were engineers or artists and actually created something, they would know anything about how the stuff that they're trying to sell actually works and what it's supposed to do. And our society is increasingly built not to work. It's built to
decay,
to decay, to have planned obsolescence, to frustrate public trust in public institutions. And like, oh, the government's not going to give you water at the airport anymore.
So you have to buy a smart water.
I wonder if that's where this is going to go. How long until you can't get a water fountain
without downloading an app and signing up for an email
unlock
newsletter?
Your water by tweeting #SodaStream.
Oh my god! I have a follow-up consumer rant, and I actually have one more question to ask you about the state of labor in baseball, but we're going to do that on the Patreon feed, if that's all right with you guys. So we're going to stop down here. So Baumann, I'm going to give you a chance.
Before you go to Patreon, can I plug
your newsletter, please?
Yes. So before we go to the thing that you guys have to pay for, the listeners, I'm going to ask you to pay for something else. I've started a cycling newsletter called Wheelie Sports. It's on Substack. You go to wheeliesports.substack.com. It comes out twice a week. I'll be covering road cycling, so the Tour de France and everything involved in, the dozens of other races that happen throughout the season. Cycling, to me, is very much like baseball, and it's a sport with a proud literary tradition that takes for fucking ever to resolve, and it's mostly about sitting around waiting for stuff to go wrong. And so I know, you guys know Jake Mintz. He's a big cycling person. He and I have bonded over.
Who's
some Zach Graham's college classmate. I don't know if you met him. But we bonded over this on, the sort of the similarities between cycling and baseball. So wheeliesports.substack.com. It's $5 a month or $50 a year to read. And I would very much appreciate you guys' support. Also sign up for FanGraphs memberships, get all sorts of perks, no ads, stuff like that. That's everything I had to plug.
Mike, if you could just not listen to what I'm about to say, because I hate to compliment you while you're here, but go sign up for Mike's cycling newsletter. For my money, one of the best writers on the internet, still writing. Everybody else has been driven out of this profession by the vagaries of the world, but Mike is still trudging along, and I enjoy reading everything he writes. I have never regretted it. So go check that out, please.
You want to know what the actually, as we speak right now, the most recent post on the newsletter is 2,600 words. about what a bad idea it is for the top teams in cycling to try to upset the structure of the sport to court American venture capital investment. So this is all.
Oh my God.
Perfect.
If you like this, you will like that.
It's all one story, baby. It's all one take. It's all the same. Michael Baumann, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!